Never do a sleep study from the deep web. All of my life I've had problems sleeping, and recently it has been a lot worse. I have a lot of anxiety, and I thought that maybe clearing my mind and being able to sleep at night might help. So I started asking around on Facebook if anyone had any good results on those sleep studies they mentioned applying for. Most of them say they haven't heard back, which is really odd given that it was months ago that they sent in the questionnaire. That wasn't promising to me, and it sounded like a scam. But then I started seeing ads and posts from sleep studies in my Facebook feed and also on my browser's windows, almost like I had searched for it myself. The Facebook feeds looked like the ones my friends had, so I didn't bother with those. I just figured the companies were swamped with requests, or maybe they were scams. An acquaintance of mine on Facebook said I should try the one he went to, because he did spend a few nights at the sleep study, and they hooked him up to all of these patches and sent him the results that he really only got about 2 hours of deep sleep, and he should try these sleeping pills the doctor prescribed to him. He says now he sleeps like a baby and feels rested in the morning, although he does have really vivid dreams of doing weird things. I wasn't about to take any pills unless my personal doctor suggested it, but I really wanted some results. I hadn't had a good night's sleep since I can't even remember. Probably the only time I did was during my drinking days, but since then I grew up and became a responsible adult with a lot of added stress. I opened the private message my friend sent to me with a URL on it. It wasn't a normal .com link, it went to a .to domain, which I found rather odd. Several years ago, the top-level domains for Tonga sold to a lot of people, but I hadn't heard of anyone using them for quite a while. I always thought it was more of a gimmick since they were being sold from the country of Tonga and ended in .to instead of .com. Most of the domains, including this one, didn't have a WHOIS registry, which is sketchy, to say the least. I'm not going to tell you the domain name here because I don't want the same thing that has happened to me to happen to you. Like an idiot, I went to this website to check it out. I didn't think my so-called friend would trick me. I mean, I don't know him well enough to really say he's a friend, but we had been virtual friends on that website for many years. He was on my friends list and liked many of my posts. His friends, occupation, and family members always seemed legit. Maybe he was hacked. I don't know. But the moment I clicked on the link, his account disappeared or I was blocked. I have no clue. I have tried searching for him under fake accounts and under my real one, but his account doesn't show up under any searches at all. I wish it would because I really would like to know what happened to me. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so I click on the link and it brings me to a questionnaire with a bunch of general questions, including my name, address, and phone number. I enter in that I have a lot of anxiety and that it is hard for me to go to sleep at night. And I get most of my rest from 5 a.m. until I have to wake up at 7 to get ready for work. It's clearly not enough sleep, and I want to figure out how I can sleep better every night, and then also answered a bunch of other multiple choice questions. Then I hit submit as instructed. A few weeks went by without an answer, and I started to think it was like all of the rest of the surveys until I received an email giving me directions to the sleep study and that my appointment was in 2 weeks. I was to be at the address at 9 a.m. prompt, and if I was any later than that, the appointment would be canceled. So I marked it on my calendar. I was so excited for the next 2 weeks. I really could barely sleep, but I suppose I wouldn't have slept anyway. Their address was at this old building that I thought had been abandoned for years in a neighboring town. It sure did look that way. There were no cars in the front parking lot at all. I noticed the vegetation was all dried up and like no one had watered it for ages. I figured that maybe they went from town to town and rented empty buildings for their study, then moved on. That had to be the answer. I went inside and waited in an empty room with just a couch and a camera. Then a woman in a nurse's uniform opened the waiting room window and placed some forms on the counter. Fill out these forms and hold on to them. A doctor will be with you momentarily, she said, and then shut the window. The room became quiet. I mean really quiet, like a sound room. There wasn't any noise from the outside or any electrical noise until a strange hum came in from all directions, and the sweet smell of almonds filtered in. It was a soothing tone, barely audible, but I have great hearing. It calmed me, and I felt like I was in a dream state. It was the calmest I had felt in years. I filled out more forms about my eating habits, how much caffeine I drank, and my dreams, about how much sleep I got a night, family history of health problems, and then it asked for emergency contacts. I thought that a little odd since I thought I'd just be sleeping, but I filled it out anyway, because I felt okay with it, calmed. Then waited for the doctor in a state of mind that was hard to describe. I felt serene, controlled, and suggestible. It was the doctor, not a nurse, who came out to get me. He wore a white lab coat and Birkenstock sandals, of all things, with socks. I thought that was weird for a doctor to do, but then again, this was a sleep study and not a doctor's appointment, and I remember thinking that I was okay with that idea. He went over my paperwork with a few hms and ha's here and there, and then told me to strip down naked. Naked? I asked, a little disturbed by the idea. Yes, he said. We will need to put the sensors on different parts of your body, and the clothing might interrupt their positions. The hum in the room was back, and I felt calm again. Okay, I murmured and let him proceed. He put tabs everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Even places I didn't really think I needed tabs. Also the backs of my ears. I felt okay with anything. Then he told me to just make myself comfortable and that the tabs had radio sensors, so I didn't need to be connected to any wires seen in the pictures. I found this strange but went ahead with it anyway. I suppose they thought I would die of absolute boredom because there were no books to read, magazines to browse, or even a TV to watch. Maybe, I thought, the idea was to get me to sleep from doing nothing, so I made myself comfortable on the bed and quickly fell asleep, faster than normal. I slept like a dog. It was the first time I slept soundly since I stopped drinking. Sleeping wasn't the problem now. The new problem were my dreams. As I slept, I kept dreaming that I was going places and doing stuff I wouldn't normally do. I went to multiple ATMs and took out a few $100s from each. I went into homes while people were sleeping and took jewelry and wallets. It all felt so real, but I slept so soundly. I awoke in the morning completely rested and felt amazing, still attached to the patches they claimed had wirelessly connected to their system. I was so rested that I wanted to do it again for another week when they offered and promised to be back the next night. I went off to work feeling great and started to have a wonderful day until I found out my friend who had told me about this place had been arrested for armed robbery and murder. I was shocked. I didn't know him that well at all, but he just seemed like a nice guy. It was in the news and all over the internet that the police had undeniable proof that it was him. The reason why it was so prominent is that the house he robbed was the mayor's house, and he shot the mayor's wife when he saw her walking through the hall. That night I almost decided not to go in because the news had shocked me so badly, but there was something inside of me that needed to go in again, an impulse. It was like an addiction, a massive craving. I went in and the same thing happened. I was hooked up to some patches and smelled that same weird almond smell and slept soundly. This time I had a dream I was robbing a house with jewelry and having intimate relations with the owner. It felt so good and so real. When I awoke, I again felt amazing and completely rested. I didn't know how they were doing it, but I didn't want it to stop. I went in a few more times that week, and the dreams were stranger and stranger. But still, I thought they were just dreams, until I watched the news that Friday night. A woman who looked just like the woman in my dreams said some man broke into her home and stole all of her jewelry and did other things to her that I just can't bring myself to mention. My head suddenly ached. I made an emergency appointment at my doctor and told them I felt like someone had been drugging me and had the worst headache I'd ever had. I lied about the headache, but really wanted to get to the bottom of it. They did a drug test, and I had to wait a week for the results. I tried to go back to the sleep center to ask them questions, but they had moved on. There was no trace of them even being there, and when I called the number on the rental sign near the building, the number had been disconnected. My doctor's test found trace amounts of scopolamine in my system. He said it typically only lasts about 7 hours, but the amount must have been really high, and if I had waited any longer, there would be no traces of it at all. I'm scared now. I don't know what to do. I will be arrested, but I was under the influence of whatever they gave me, and now, except for what my doctor says, there is no proof at all. What do I do? What do I do?